Hi, Stuart here. Today, tips for developers. Critical thinking. There's just no substitute. Take an online course, read some books, and most important, do the exercises that go with them. You cannot learn to critical think by observation or osmosis. You have to work at it. And then you have to work at it being your default mode of thinking, at least while at work. The people I respect most in my field, whether they're technical or not, are excellent critical thinkers. The most effective executives and leaders are excellent critical thinkers. Be a critical thinker. Improve your memory. There's just no substitute for being able to produce a documentation snippet or remember a tuning parameter or a command line parameter or a useful algorithm or a useful library or whatever. And the only way to do that, and then sew those all together into patterns and domain-driven designs and architectures, and be able to do that is to be able to put it all in your head. And for some things, what you put in your head is how to find it again. That's a perfectly reasonable thing. And it's a good starting place. But the really amazing business leaders and architects and developers that I know all have phenomenal memories. So if you don't necessarily have a great memory now, that doesn't mean you can't have a great memory. One little warning in this area, there are an awful lot of snake oil salesmen who want to sell you their patented memory course along with their pomegranate energy cognition drink. Stay away from those like candy. Stay with memory learning things that are backed by real neuroscience and have hundreds of thousands of people who say, I use this, it works for me. Learn to touch type. Over the last 35 plus years, I can't begin to tell you how many copies of this lovely software I have gifted to my developers and QAs and other people so that they can learn to touch type. There is really nothing nearly as powerful as the ability to touch type. And almost anyone can do it. And it's a game changer. Free yourself from the tyranny of the rodent. I see particularly more junior developers all the time and take their hands off the keyboard to save a file or compile or take a screenshot or whatever. They take their hands off the home positions on the keyboard and they put one hand on the mouse. And at that point, they've broken their chain of thought. There is just no substitute for, a subset of 30 to 50 speed keys in your operating system and tool set. And not having to go to the mouse will keep you from breaking flow. And it's also phenomenally more productive. Which, if you're going to be a coder, use a font with ligatures. A font designed for developers, not for typesetting or for applications on a phone, but one specifically for developers. Fear Code's a nice example. Most of these are free, and they're absolute game changers because when you are looking at a screen, you can tell a 7 from an I or an L, a 0 from an O, and ligatures make it so that the mathematical symbols that you were taught for things like inequality and lambdas and things like that will look like they're supposed to look. So you don't have to have your brain glue together greater than equals to get greater than equals. Ligatures do that for you. A ligature is the font's ability to recognize that one character following another should be substituted for in the display, right? Not in the file, but in the display for the revised glyph. And of course, if you're a developer, monospaced fonts are a way to make sure that things flow well for you and that you can align things. If you're programming in a language like Python that cares about indentation, as opposed to something like C#, which cares about squiggly brackets. A monospace font is just not even a negotiable. And so you might as well use a monospace font with ligatures and differentiators. The command line is your friend. It astounds me how many new technology people I meet, even DevOps folks, who just can't get around the command line. And really, there are only two, and they're PowerShell and Bash. PowerShell runs on pretty much everywhere, and Bash runs pretty much everywhere. So on my Windows machine, I have PowerShell 7 and Bash. On my Linux machine, I have PowerShell and Bash. But those things are not very useful if you don't know how to use them. And again, having a good memory to remember what all the commands are is an incredibly productivity enhancing thing. The ability to be on the command line and manipulate your source control and build your code and deploy your code and test your code and navigate to somewhere and start your favorite editor or IDE right where you are, like what the command is for that, is an indispensable piece of productivity. And there are some things for developers where PowerShell or Bash and the ability to chain a bunch of commands together is way more efficient than trying to write a piece of code in whatever programming language you use. So scripting languages and the basic mastery thereof are an essential part of developer QA, DevOps, and even BA productivity. You'd be surprised how often that comes in handy. Declutter. I see team members whose desktops look like they pointed an icon shotgun at their desktop and pulled the trigger repeatedly. There's so much visual noise, it hurts my brain. People can protest all they want that they know how to navigate that. They know where everything is right where they want it. Neuroscience disagrees with you. Clean is productive and focused and purposeful, and cluttered is distracting. That should be true of your work environment, but it's especially true of your workstation. Mise-en-place. I have these conversations where I'm doing a desktop share. I'm trying to help somebody out. And I go, okay, where did you put it? And they go, I don't know. I'm going to have to search for it. And my brain wants to say, please call me back when you find it in several hours. But my brain generally advises that politeness is the path to victory. So instead, what I try to do is teach people mise-en-place. No matter what workstation I'm on, my code's in C code or D code or /code, right? It just is. My documents are always in the same place. My Camtasias are always in the same place. My blah, blah, blahs are always in the same place. And, everything is mirrored to the cloud as appropriate. And I always know where things are. I don't have to spend any time looking for things on my own workstation. You know how computers work? I'm staggered by the number of people that I interview with computer science degrees who can't tell me what a compiler does. You just have to know certain things to basically be able to code and know what your code is going to end up doing in the machine, all the way down to the hardware level if possible. That doesn't mean I'm advocating that you memorize all the bytecode instructions, although, if you write device drivers, I certainly would do that. But most of us don't, right? So at least have the basics of how your hardware works, how operating systems work. Lots of great books, most of them for free on this. What a compiler is, what a linker is, what an optimizer is, what is assembly, what is machine code, right? You will find that your ability to understand what your code is actually really trying to do much better if you understand how computers actually work. This is an ongoing, evolving process. All of these things are. I'm a better touch typist than I was 20 years ago. Understand IP networking. If you're a cloud anything and you don't understand IP networking, or you're not writing apps for a phone, even then it really, really helps to understand networking. But particularly for cloud developers, you need to understand IP networking it is the winner of all the networking protocols. It's what the internet is, right? So you need to understand abstract protocol parts, like what does it look like on the wire? What are the different bits and pieces? Who's handling those bits and pieces for you? And then how things show up at your doorstep as a developer. For example, how your web API controller's method got triggered, right? If you understand that, you're going to have a much easier time writing things that don't suck on the network. And then you should just know some basic firewall, hardware, router, proxy type terminology. You should know what people are talking about when they use the word subnet. You may not be a certified network engineer or whatever, but as a developer, there's just no excuse for not knowing IP networking, at least a little. And so having tools like Fiddler and Wireshark on your machine, if you're allowed to, and being able to use them to find out what the heck is going wrong with your beautiful, well-crafted software is a life-saving skill. My name's Stuart. Thanks for your kind attention.